So why do my ping pong delays only ping and not pong?
You gotta go stereo. Let's go.
I know, I cut my head shaving. Hopefully it's not too distracting. Ignore it if you can. Today, we're going to talk about wet dry rigs. Stereo, mono, large, and small. Now I've got a stereo wet dry rig behind me. Plexi on the left, Plexi on the right, and Plexi in the center. Now this is not practical, but just for fun, let's hear how it sounds. So why do this? Mostly because it's just awesome. You've spent years getting that punchy guitar tone that cuts through the mix. But as soon as you add any type of time-based or modulation effects to it, it's just not as good. No matter where you put the mix knob on all of your effects, there's some sort of give to your tone. The people who are the effects loop haters. Now, I'm not an effects loops hater, but it does affect your tone. If you're like me, I use my preamp for distortion. I use my actual amplifier for distortion. I only use dry pedals and boost pedals just to enhance the amp, not as a dirty channel. So I'm going to show you how you can use one amp's tone and share with several other amps. Of course, it's best to use the same amp when you're using multiple amps, but it isn't mandatory. You can use whatever you have on hand as long as it has an effects loop. So let me show you some of the things you're going to need. Okay, so what are you going to need to go wet dry? So if you're going to go stereo, you're going to need 3 amplifiers. 2 of them have to have an effects loop. 1 of them, it doesn't matter. If you're going to go mono, you only need 2 amplifiers. 1 of them has to have an effects loop. The other one doesn't. You're also going to need some way to split the signal to at least 1 or 2 amps, depending on whether you're going stereo mono. But you got to make sure that whatever you use, whether it's an ABY box like this, has this lift button on it. That's really important because once you're using multiple amplifiers, you're introducing different ways to get to ground, multiple directions to ground. And then you have ground loops and you start getting hums and buzzes and all kinds of noise. This lift button right here is the magic button on how to get rid of all the noise when you're hooking together multiple amps. Don't do it at the ground plug with one of those little things that lifts the ground. That is not safe. You want to lift the ground at the guitar signal. So you can use something like this ABY box, or you can use something like this radial shotgun, which actually has stereo in, stereo out, or mono in and can run up to 4 amps, and it has a ground lift on each one of the amps. It's nice to have this phase button here, but it really isn't 100% necessary. We'll get into phase another time. If you're using somewhat similar guitar amplifiers, you shouldn't have a phasing issue as long as they're set kind of together. You're also going to need, obviously, some effects, some time-based or modulation effects. If you're going in mono, then it only needs to have one in and one out. If you're going in stereo, then it needs to have either mono or stereo in. But the key is that the last thing in your signal chain needs to have a stereo out, so that the last thing coming out is stereo. One other quick thing is when you're in a stereo system, what you can do is you come out of your effects loop here, and on your main amplifier, you just connect your effects loop just like normal, send and return. But on your other amplifier, all you do is come out of the right or left part of the left output of your effect, and you come into the return on the other amplifier. Nothing else is connected to that other amplifier. So all you're doing is borrowing the power section, not the preamp of the other amplifier. Therefore, the same tone that you're running, you're just using the other amplifiers to amplify that tone, and you don't have to set a whole bunch of bass treble on a bunch of different amps. You can just do it on one amp and not the other. There's a little tip for you. So I'll put up some diagrams in the video, whether they be here or down below, for all the technical stuff. But let's get into the fun stuff. Let's try a whole bunch of different configurations. We'll try some combos. We'll try some mono stereo. Let's just try some different stuff. Let's get a bit more practical here. So now I'm just running a mono wet dry system. Got a Marshall TSL and a Marshall DSL, using the TSL wet, using the DSL dry. And if I didn't mention before, I've got a couple of room mics, stereo on the right, one on the left. I've got this mic kind of sitting right in front of the cabinets, call it stage level. And I've got close mics on the cabinets. I only have two on this one here because I've got Creamback M's and Creamback H's, two different speakers in that, so I want to capture the full dimension of the sound. And I'm purposely keeping the amp super, super wet so you can hear what the wet-dry system adds to the articulation of what you're playing. So this is just the wet amp. So as you can hear, that is not really a very usable sound, but you add in the dry. Much better. You can even keep it super wet and just rock out. No one can fault you for a sound like that. Okay, so we're getting a bit more practical as we go. This is fully stage-worthy, touring-worthy, local band-worthy. Here's a nice small wet-dry system. You got two 212s. You got a little 15-watt going wet here, a little 20-watt Marshall going dry. Do not let the wattage fool you. This thing cranks and sounds amazing. So let's go. We'll do a little clean, a little dirty. Pretty good. Okay, last but not least, a couple of small combos, a couple of 112 combos. If you like what we're doing here, please like and subscribe, leave any comments. I will return any messages that you leave. Remember, 3 amps are better than 2 and 2 amps are better than 1. You should try out a wet-dry system because once you do, you'll miss it every time it's not there. Thanks for hanging out.